Welcome to From the Spectrum podcast. This is a podcast about autism. It is my goal to explain what is autism. I plan to use a mixture of scientific literature, personal experience, and opinion. With opinion, I will explain why I feel the way I do and give examples. I will provide links to various references for each episode. For each episode, we will discuss various aspects of autism. For today's episode, I can't help but to be confused and concerned about the direction of autism research. Autism research, for the most part, is directed at after autism is developed. I can't understand that. There are many theories, and maybe the light, or more specifically, the artificial light as a cause, is no different. However, the cause of autism must consider the beginning, and life on Earth forms using light, water, and magnetism. And light is the primary controller of the other two. It seems to us this is the beginning stage. Not BPA, or vaccines, pesticides, or food fillers, or the climate, or pollution. And all of those, what I am beginning to think is clickbait. People, researchers, scientists, etc., want that recognition, that funding, want the reception of being valuable and solidify their spot. I did not say those other items are not a problem. I am saying the human body and biology in its optimal environment, the environment it evolved and sustained, is incredible and resilient. I am saying the prenatal condition, the condition of the biological lineage of mother and father, things you've heard, like nutritional deficiencies and vitamin deficiencies, such as iron and the vitamin Bs, the folic acid, the synthetic B9, which we will discuss more later. All of these are heavily researched. I am saying once you get to that stage of the biological process, many variances appear. Often it is confounding in the literature. I think these are what show up as a biological implication from the overall abnormal biological development caused by light, artificial light. A change in light from sunlight to electricity and the changes in the light from incandescent to the modern LED. Removed is the entire spectrum of the light, except for whatever limited wavelength that artificial light source provides, be it healthy or unhealthy. Often, when it is isolated, when it is just specific wavelength, it is unhealthy. When our biology receives the entire spectrum of the sunlight, beautiful things happen. Human life happens, and it flourishes. In addition, another confounding part of autism research are the number of genes connected to this modern-day health condition. There are over 100 risk genes. Sometimes it causes autism. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes it causes autism with other health implications. This says volumes. This says a lot about what is actually going on and where should we actually be looking. This says something else is the driving factor of what has happened and what is happening. Here are the common or known regions of interest. Genetic variants, such as mutations. DNA sequencing changes from the genome. This could include changes in just one of those amino acids we've discussed, or changes in nucleotides. Copy number variants, which involves segments of DNA and consist of two types, duplication and deletion. Duplication includes extra copies from a genomic region. Deletion includes a loss of copies from a region. With autism, copy number type does seem to show duplications, particularly regions responsible for brain development and function. That is easy to connect. People understand this. People hear or see about this literature, and it makes sense to them. Okay, brain development, brain function. Okay, that's a problem with autism development. Yes. Also, autism and deletions are shown to be involved in neural development, synaptic pathways, and functioning. Remember neurogenesis and synaptogenesis. Remember autism in the embryo episode. Also, early episode discussing 16p11.2. This is an example here. Well researched, well understood with autism. Gene-environment interaction. This is a hot topic. These include all of those environmental relationships mentioned earlier, including light. The reason why light is greater than the pesticides or the BPA, those food fillers, and so forth. Those things I called clickbait is this. Epigenetics are changes in gene expressions with no DNA sequencing changes. Genetic predispositions and how it interacts with prenatal environment is a topic. Prenatal care. Remember folic acid. Folic acid was briefly discussed in Cause of Autism episode at the end. Folate is crucial for synthesizing nucleotides, DNA and RNA, and methylation. The wrong amounts of folic, such as high doses, appears to implicate cell division. Remember, cells divide and give life to living organisms. Remember autism in the embryo. B12 and folate, which is B9, are human photoreceptors. A lack of B12 means a lack of myelin. Remember those roads cells travel. Gravel roads is poor myelin or poor connectivity. Myelin equals the highways, the way that cells can travel with more efficiency. The problem is known. The cause is unknown to most. Unknown to most. But since they are photoreceptors, they require proper light, specific light. Light that we've evolved under. This is critical in a gene tied to autism, MTHFR. Methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, used for folate and homocysteine metabolism. Homocysteine makes an amino acid called cysteine. It's a building block to sequence other proteins. It's an amino acid. Taken together, light generates life on Earth It creates the living organism. Light is higher order, meaning it is higher upstream and therefore must be the first point of contact. If you troubleshoot a problem, you go in order. Otherwise, even if you find problems, hence the items just discussed about autism research, such as the copy number, the deletions, the duplications, the altered brain regions, and implications, such as those areas for social reward. You discover a problem at this point. You must go farther upstream to understand what caused that problem at that point. If your cell phone is not charging, you're not going to necessarily replace the battery first. Maybe you look at the port, or maybe you look at the charger. What is causing the cell phone not to charge? The MTHFR is involved with methionine, that unique amino acid with only one codon, the start signal for proteins and DNA sequencing. Elevated folate in the exogenous form, which all folate is exogenous, can cause problems here. It does not appear folate, the endogenous folate, that endogenous B9, I should say, causes problems. But whenever it's supplemented, that synthetic version can cause problems. The problem is folate is added to many things, including prenatal vitamins. And sometime in the 90s, it was added to essentially all grains, all food grains. Folic acids lower electrons. Remember the electron transport chain. This is where it's implicated at a very atomic level in the mitochondria. Very hard for people to understand. The mitochondrial problem. Well, one problem is redox power. This is changes in oxygen states. Then, methylation problems. Methylation is a biochemical process regulating gene expression that recruits proper proteins. It recruits which proteins are needed for that. Our areas of interest includes roles in embryogenesis and the placenta, and epigenesis. In addition, other areas of autism research includes brain connectivity and neurobiology. This is interesting to me, but no, I enjoy neurobiology and neuroscience. I do think this is valuable research and helps understanding autism. However, the more I objectively think about it, I ask, what is the purpose? If understanding about autism, then okay. If for medication, then not okay. The cause is much more valuable and necessary. Socio-environmental or socioeconomic factors. First, see Robert Sapolsky on Peter Attia Drive podcast, around minute 40 or 42 or so, on SCS. This area does not have value. Sapolsky's explanation certainly does. For autism research, it does not. Early diagnosis and biomarkers. These are critical. In the short future, we will have an episode on eye tracking in infants and toddlers. It is awesome data, and this is very valuable. Early diagnosis equals better outcomes. Autism and comorbid conditions. These include other psychiatric conditions like anxiety, OCD, speech and language problems, ADHD. And a side note, we will have a future episode and we will explore autism and ADHD, specifically this other condition. I don't understand this relationship. How do you have autism and ADHD? However, the comorbid conditions are, of course, not limited to psychiatric conditions. Much of them include things like epilepsy or GI problems, problems with specific organs like the thyroid, leukocytes, Rett syndrome, things like dyspraxia, that poor motor movement, that poor motor development. These things would be comorbid in addition to the autism. This research exists. Also, personalized interventions. This is difficult. Researching what works with different levels of autism is infinite. Remember, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Medications are, of course, a major area of interest. I hate it. It's harmful. Our current paradigm is questionable. Remember the Bayh-Dole Act. It's a profit mill, and nothing disrupts the profit mill. How is the U.S. almost times 2 the health budget of the second modern country, and 3 times the average of all modern countries? 3 times. And this is billions of dollars in the health budget. That budget and our lifespan is flat. Chronic health conditions are out of control with rapid increases. And 4 of the top 5 revenues, the business types, include health. U.S. hospitals is 2. Over-the-counter cosmetics and health, such as vitamins and supplements and all these over-the-counter products, is 3. Our health insurance, the health insurance, is number 4. Number 5, of course, is Big Pharma. But remember, they're number 5 because of the amount of money they spend in advertisement. If you include centralized money, U.S. banks, 5 of the top 5 are actually involved here. The banks, the centralized money, controls everything. And this is bad news. Those are the top spots in autism research. I question, what is the purpose? What are the goals? The hope? What is happening? The purpose of today's episode: autism's generational increase and regions of interest ought to be the cause of autism. You know the stance on the podcast. Parental melanin, artificial light, and likely something not previously discussed is our non-native EMF, electromagnetic field. Electromagnetic fields not naturally created from nature. Remember, light is an electromagnetic strip. This is a natural occurring EMF, but the non-native EMFs, they're probably going to have some interest here. But here is the general outline of what autism research ought to look like. Group 1, the control group. Now, N is unknown. The number of subjects for each are all unknown, and we will get into that momentarily. But group 1 is split into high likelihood and typically likelihood. pretty common in autism research. And this group has no change in their daily life, no change in the process of pregnancy and having the baby. Group 2. Again, the subjects, the N equals is unknown. This is also broken down into high likelihood and typical likelihood. But the change here is the pregnant mother spends a certain amount of time, X amount of time, outdoors in the sun to begin with. Let's say 8 hours. And this includes morning sunlight, UV sunlight, and sunset. Likely, the importance here is in that order. Morning light, morning sunlight might be the most important light. However, the UV will be obtained here, that midday sunlight, and then the sunset. 8 total hours or so. Group 3, subjects unknown still. N is unknown. High likelihood group and a typical likelihood group. Here, proper circadian rhythm for approximately 6 months before pregnancy. So the mother and the father will have proper circadian entrainment. This is a proper circadian rhythm based off of the latitude, the light and dark cycle. And they will have the 8 hours of sun exposure, the morning, the UV, and sunset. I say 8 hours, but whatever is determined necessary. Once conception occurs, once the mother is considered pregnant, the pregnant woman will continue that 8 hours of sun exposure all the way up through delivery. Now these 3 groups all have the high likelihood versus typical likelihood. And each group has a different factor thrown in. Of course, group 1 has nothing thrown in. And then group 2 has the pregnant mother will spend 8 hours. So we're increasing the sun exposure once conception is known. And then group 3 is the highest controlled group, whereby they're going to have the circadian rhythm set. No artificial light at night, proper circadian biology is going to be rolling through the mother and the father. And then they will have the increased light exposure during the day. So proper circadian entrainment and increased sunlight exposure for both mother and father. This is to stimulate that POMC gene and the melanin, the endogenous neuromelanin, to get those cellular functions activated. And then the pregnant mother will continue this sun exposure. This is in hopes will reverse the lack of melanin and the biological implications of the artificial light that we've had for over generations now, since the creation of electricity and artificial light. We are going to try to reverse this and send it back to pre-electricity, back when the mother and father had no choice about the sunlight, or the light exposure, I should say, and the proper circadian rhythms. This was all common until artificial light and the electricity occurred. Since then, our health conditions has been thrown into a tornado. Nothing is working. The health condition is not in a good situation. I am saying there's so much funding, so much research and attention in autism on things like the diagnostic side and creating assessment tools, the genetic side, and all of those items we listed previously, such as the behavior side. Why not finding a cause, a stopping side? Now, here are some things that I've loosely created or came up with that need to be pinpointed. Areas to consider are there previous shift work? Does the mother and father have previous shift work? Because this can really do harm to the melanin. The length of time parents must be off of shift work. I hate to break it to you folks, but humans aren't adapted for the shift work. We are living test subjects because shift work hasn't been around until once artificial light was developed, once electricity was developed. And remember the pros. We have more job opportunities and we have more goods being produced. However, the medical literature and the health implications of shift work are alarming. This is very alarming. Remember that melanopsin not discovered until 1998 and leptin in 1994 with all of our human test subjects, and we're well into it now, generational. And it's normalized. Oh, some people work night shift, or oh, some people enjoy working night shift. Okay. And the effect size. How large should these groups be? Now, with the rates of autism that we're seeing in 2024, today, it would suggest that maybe the effect size, the subject size, could be smaller, at least on the pilot studies, just to see if there are any changes and determine the significance of the changes. And things like OCT scans and labs associated with poor melanin. How long to reestablish proper biology and circadian rhythms? Might it be 6 months? I don't know. But people know these things can be determined. There are people that know this and can determine this. Not me. But this is, for one, wouldn't be difficult for a baseline, and two, understand modifications for future studies to grow. Now, I suspect there will be a change here in the future of autism diagnosis if Group 2 and especially Group 3 are implemented. Okay, so the purpose of the study is this: send humanity back to a lifestyle before autism just magically shows up in human evolution. It's not complicated. There are some comparisons between the Amish, for example, and the modern humans, everyone else, and the rates of autism. The Amish have pretty controlled light environments and electricity, and very few non-native EMFs even, which is a topic for another discussion. With the rates of autism and these things spiraling out of control, something has to give. Something must change, not only in our environment, but in autism research. Let's research something that could actually fix and reverse these rates of autism. It doesn't seem that complicated to me. It doesn't seem like people should be involved here. And not on the side of developing medications. If you're listening to the episode, listening to the podcast, please feel free to leave a review or ratings. In podcasting, reviews, ratings, and downloads are huge, and I very much appreciate your feedback. I love that interaction. I love the topic of autism and want you to discuss the topic of autism. And you can do that with me on X at RPS47586. It is From the Spectrum Finding Superpowers with Autism podcast on X, or Facebook, or email info.fromthespectrum gmail.com. You can catch me on all the major platforms for podcasting. Thank you for listening to From the Spectrum podcast.